My mom ruined my wedding toast by screaming, "You don't deserve him after what you did in college." Everyone went silent as my husband looked at me in shock. My cousin whispers, "She planned this." What they didn't know was, I'm still in shock from what happened at my wedding reception. I can't stop replaying that moment in my head. My mom made an announcement during her wedding toast that completely humiliated me and shattered my new marriage. She screamed about something I had done in college, something I had kept secret for years, and it was like my whole world came crashing down. My husband, James, was left speechless, and everyone at the wedding was watching in stunned silence. I don't know what to do now. I've never felt more betrayed by my own mother, and now, I'm questioning everything. I never thought this day would be anything less than perfect. It's what I had dreamed about for years, the wedding to my best friend, James. We met in college, and while our relationship was anything but ordinary, it felt right. He was everything I wanted, kind, understanding, patient, and someone who made me feel like I was enough. My family had always been complicated, but I convinced myself that, for one day, they'd be happy for me. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I stood at the back of the barn, clutching my bouquet, staring out at the rows of white chairs where my family and friends sat. James was waiting for me at the end of the aisle, looking as handsome as I'd ever seen him, his eyes filled with love and excitement. I felt my heart race as the doors opened, and I stepped into the sunlight. I could hear the gentle music playing in the background, the rustle of leaves from the breeze coming through the open windows, and the sound of people taking in deep breaths of awe as they watched me walk. My mom, Diane, sat in the front row, as expected. But there was a weight in the air that I couldn't shake. Her gaze was cold, fixed on me, as she crossed her arms over her chest. It wasn't the look of a mother proud of her daughter, it was the look of someone waiting for something to go wrong. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that everything would be fine. She had always been this way, a little too critical, a little too judgmental. But I had come to accept it over the years. She was my mom. She wasn't perfect, and neither was I. James and I exchanged vows, surrounded by the people we loved. The ceremony went off without a hitch. For a moment, I let myself believe that everything would be all right, that we would leave that day with nothing but joy and hope for the future. But I was wrong. The reception started off beautifully. The guests mingled, laughed, and danced. The music played, the champagne flowed, and everything seemed to be going as planned. I was so happy to be surrounded by everyone who had helped shape my life, who had supported James and me throughout our relationship. But the minute the speeches started, I felt the tension return. I knew my mom was about to speak, and I didn't know what to expect. Over the years, I had learned not to rely on her for warm, loving words, and the truth was, I dreaded her toasts. She wasn't the type to shower anyone with praise. In fact, most of the time, her speeches were filled with thinly veiled criticisms, wrapped in a nice package of polite language. My cousin Lily, my maid of honor, gave a heartfelt speech. She talked about our childhood, about how we had grown up together and how happy she was to see me finally finding someone who made me happy. Then, James's best man, Mike, gave a touching toast, sharing stories of how he had watched James grow over the years and how he admired the man he had become. It was exactly what I had expected, warm, sincere, and filled with love. But then it was my mother's turn. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping across the wooden floor as she positioned herself at the podium. Her movements were deliberate, her gaze fixed in a way that made me nervous. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room turning toward her, waiting for what she would say. I knew this moment was important, this was my mother, after all. I wanted her to say something nice, something to show that, despite everything, she supported me. But I also knew her too well. She had a way of turning everything, even the happiest occasions, into something uncomfortable. As she cleared her throat and adjusted the microphone, I felt a chill in the air. James looked at me, offering a small, reassuring smile. I smiled back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I have something to say, my mother's voice rang out, sharper than I had expected. The room fell silent. I tried to smile, hoping she'd say something sweet. But then her next words hit me like a slap in the face. You don't deserve him after what you did in college. The room went completely still. It was like time stopped. My eyes shot to James, whose face was frozen in disbelief, his jaw slack. His gaze flicked back to me, looking for some kind of explanation. I could hear the whispers of the guests around me, the confused murmurs, but it felt like everything was happening in slow motion. My mom's words echoed in my ears. You don't deserve him. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart pounded. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What was she talking about? What did she mean? My mind was racing, but my body was paralyzed, frozen in place. I glanced at Lily, my cousin, who was sitting at a table nearby. Her eyes were wide with shock, but then, just as quickly, she leaned over and whispered, barely audibly, she planned this. I barely heard her. I was too focused on my mother's words, still echoing in my mind. The room was waiting for me to respond, but I couldn't. I didn't know how. What could I say? How could I explain something that had been hidden for so long? Something I hadn't told anyone, especially James? My mother continued, her voice growing louder with each word, as if she had been waiting for this moment to destroy everything. I know about what you did in college. You think he deserves someone like you? After everything you've done? You're a liar, Olivia, and you don't deserve any of this. James looked at me, his face now pale. I could see the confusion in his eyes, followed by something else, hurt. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He didn't understand. None of them did. No one knew the truth. The truth that I had kept locked away for so long, terrified of what it would do to my relationship, my family. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I felt like I was suffocating. How could I explain the thing I had done? The mistake I had made when I was 19 years old? How could I explain the hurtful choice that, even now, still haunted me? The silence stretched on, unbearable, as my mother's words hung in the air like a dark cloud. Finally, James's voice broke through. What is she talking about, Liv? What did you do? I could see the hurt in his eyes, the disbelief. His words were calm, but there was a sharp edge to them, and I knew he wasn't just confused, he was hurt. The foundation of everything we had built together was crumbling before my eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I was paralyzed by the weight of her accusation, by the weight of my own secret. The room was unbearably quiet, and the tension hung in the air like a thick fog. I could feel James's eyes on me, searching for an explanation, but I had none. My mother's words echoed in my head, each one piercing deeper into the wound that I had tried so hard to hide. The wedding, the day I had dreamed about for years, was now slipping away from me in front of my eyes. I could hear the murmurs around the room as people tried to process what had just happened. Whispers filled the air, and I could see the confused and concerned expressions of our guests. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run away from the eyes that were now on me, judging me, questioning me. But I couldn't. I had to face it. I had to face James. I turned to him, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I saw the hurt in his eyes, the betrayal. It was like a punch to my chest. He had trusted me, believed in me, and now, my mother's accusation was like a stain on everything we had built. James, I began, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't find the right way to explain. The truth felt too heavy, too difficult to put into words. I had kept it buried for so long, convinced that telling him would destroy everything. But now, I had no choice. My mother had forced my hand. What did you do, Liv? His voice was soft, but the pain in it was palpable. What is she talking about? I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on us. I wanted to pull him aside, to explain privately, but it was too late for that. The damage had already been done. I had to say something. I had to tell him the truth, even if it meant losing him forever. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. James, it was a mistake. A huge mistake. Something I regret every single day. I paused, my throat tightening. Back in college, before we met, I cheated on my ex. With someone I shouldn't have. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed. I didn't want you to think less of me, to think that I wasn't worthy of you. The words were spilling out now, rushed and unrefined. I couldn't stop them. I couldn't take back what had already been said. James looked at me, his expression unreadable. I couldn't tell what he was thinking, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fists clenched at his sides. He was processing, trying to understand. But I could see the wheels turning in his head, the doubt creeping in. Is that it? He asked, his voice tight. Is that what she was talking about? Is that the big secret? I nodded, but it felt like a weight had been lifted off me, even as I could feel the room closing in. I was exposed now, the truth laid bare. My secret wasn't just mine anymore, it was out in the open, for everyone to see. But James didn't speak. He just stared at me, and I could feel the distance growing between us. He was trying to process everything, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the woman standing in front of him. The silence between us was deafening, and I couldn't tell if the connection we had was still there or if it had been shattered beyond repair. My mother's smirk from across the room was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. She was watching us, as if she had orchestrated this moment from the beginning. It was a satisfaction I hadn't expected. She had never been kind to James, never truly accepted him, but now, it felt like she had succeeded in driving a wedge between us. She had forced me to confront my past, and in doing so, she had torn apart my future. Lily, my cousin, was still sitting at her table, watching the scene unfold. She had always been there for me, always had my back, but even now, I could see the sadness in her eyes. She knew what this was doing to me. She knew how much I loved James and how much I had worked to keep my past hidden. She had always told me that I needed to be honest, that secrets like this could ruin everything. But I had ignored her. I had convinced myself that keeping the truth buried was the only way to protect what I had. Now, I realized how wrong I had been. James stepped back, his eyes never leaving mine. I don't know what to say, Liv. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I need some space. I wanted to reach out, to beg him to stay, to beg him to understand that it was a mistake that haunted me every day. But I knew better than to force him into something he wasn't ready for. I knew that the trust we had built had been shattered, and no amount of pleading would fix it. I understand, I whispered, though it felt like my heart was shattering with every word. I'm so sorry, James. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant to hurt you. But he didn't answer. He just turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of people who were still watching the aftermath of my mother's cruel words. I stood there, frozen, watching him go, unable to move. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The reception continued, but it felt like a dream, an awful, distorted nightmare. I could barely focus on anything. I wanted to leave, to go after James and beg him to understand, but I couldn't. I was too ashamed, too humiliated, to show my face. My mother had done what she came here to do. She had exposed me, torn me down in front of everyone, and now, there was no going back. Lily came to sit with me, her face full of concern. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there, letting me process what had just happened. But I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for me to say something, anything. Finally, I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper. Why did she do this, Lily? Why did she have to bring it up now, at my wedding? Lily looked at me, her expression filled with sadness. You know how she is, Liv. She's never been happy for you. She's always wanted to control you, to make you feel like you're not good enough. This was her way of tearing you down, of making sure you don't get too happy. I nodded, my heart heavy. I had always known my mother was complicated, but this was something else entirely. She had known about my past, and she had waited for the perfect moment to use it against me. She had planned this. It was no accident. I wanted to scream, to yell at her, to make her understand how much pain she had caused. But I knew it wouldn't matter. She was too set in her ways, too determined to hold on to her control. And now, all I could do was pick up the pieces of my broken life and try to make sense of it. As the night wore on, I could see the glances people were giving me. Some were sympathetic, others were judgmental. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done. The wedding was no longer the celebration I had dreamed of. It had become a painful reminder of the choices I had made, the mistakes I had tried to bury, and the betrayal of the one person I had hoped would stand by me no matter what. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces. The hours dragged on like a heavy fog settling over me. Every time I glanced at the crowd, I could see the whispers, the sideways glances, the pity in the eyes of those who had been witness to my humiliation. The night that should have been the most joyful of my life had transformed into something unrecognizable. My heart ached for James, for the pain I had caused him, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that the person I had to be most angry with was my mother. Lily, sitting beside me, had tried to comfort me in her own quiet way, but it was clear she, too, was struggling to understand. She knew my mother better than anyone, and she could see the devastation in my eyes. She had been there when I confided in her all those years ago about the affair I had during my first year of college. It was a mistake I would regret forever. I had never told anyone else, not even James. I had built my entire relationship with him on a foundation of secrecy, afraid that the truth would tear us apart. But now the truth was out there. My mother had ripped that carefully built life apart with one cruel outburst. The clock on the wall ticked on, and I finally stood up from the table, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge. "I need to talk to him," I whispered to Lily, my voice hoarse. Lily gave me a sympathetic look but said nothing. She knew, just as I did, that words wouldn't fix this. There was no easy fix. I was going to have to face the consequences of my actions. I made my way toward the door to the garden, hoping to catch James before he disappeared into the night. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, the silence of the garden a stark contrast to the noise inside the barn. The dim lights from the reception cast long shadows, and I could hear the faint sound of people laughing in the distance. I spotted James near the edge of the garden, standing by himself, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He was staring off into the distance, looking like he was lost in thought. I took a tentative step forward, my heart thumping painfully in my chest. "James?" I called softly. He didn't turn around at first, but then, slowly, he faced me. His eyes were hard, the expression on his face unreadable. I could see the way his jaw tightened, like he was trying to keep his emotions in check. "What do you want, Liv?" he asked, his voice calm but distant. I need to talk to you," I said, my words catching in my throat. "I need to explain. Please, just give me a chance." James shook his head, looking away for a moment. "Explain what, Liv? That you've been hiding things from me? That your mom was right all along? That I've been with someone who didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth? What exactly is there left to explain?" The words stung more than I expected, and I flinched at the bitterness in his voice. I had never heard him speak to me like this before. This wasn't the James the first had fallen in love with. The distance between us felt insurmountable, like we were strangers. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," I said, my voice breaking. "I was scared. I thought if you knew the truth about what I'd done, it would ruin everything. But it was wrong of me to keep it from you. I was wrong not to trust you with my past. You deserve better than that. You deserve the truth." James's gaze softened for a moment, but then it hardened again, and I saw the flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "The truth," he repeated, almost as if the word had lost its meaning. "It's too late for the truth now, Liv. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had never imagined this could happen, never imagined that the man I loved would look at me with that kind of hurt in his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said, my voice trembling. "I swear. It was a mistake. It's not who I am now. I've changed, James. You have to believe me. James looked at me, his face etched with a mix of confusion, pain, and something I couldn't name. You're right. You've changed. But how am I supposed to trust that, Liv? How do I know that this won't happen again? That you won't hide something else from me, something else that might tear us apart? I won't hide anything from you again, I said, taking a step forward, desperation creeping into my voice. I'll be completely open. I swear. I just want a chance to prove it to you. Please, James. Please don't let my past ruin what we have. For a moment, he stood there, silent, his gaze fixed on the ground. I held my breath, waiting for him to say something, anything. But the longer the silence stretched on, the more I felt my hope slipping away. Finally, James spoke, his voice low and tight. I don't know, Liv. I need time. I don't know if I can just forgive you, if I can move past this. I've been standing here all night, trying to figure out what to do. And I'm not sure I have the strength to fight for us anymore. His words felt like a final blow. I had never seen him like this, so distant, so broken. I understand, I said quietly, my heart sinking into my stomach. I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. I'll give you the time you need. But please know that I love you, James. I'm not asking for you to forgive me right away. I need you to know that I'm willing to fight for us. No matter what it takes. James didn't say anything for a long time, and just as I thought he was going to walk away, he finally looked up at me. There was a sadness in his eyes, a look I would never forget. I need time, Liv, he repeated softly. I don't know if we can come back from this. But I'll think about it. And with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the garden. I stood there for a long time, the cool air brushing against my face, the weight of the evening crashing down on me. The wedding that had started with so much hope was now a distant memory. I had never felt more alone in my life. I didn't know if James and I would make it through this. I didn't know if we could rebuild the trust that had been shattered in one moment. But I knew one thing for sure, I had to face the consequences of my actions, no matter how much it hurt. And I had to learn to live with the choices I had made. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that my past, the mistakes I had hidden, had changed everything. Now, it was up to me to figure out how to move forward. The days following the wedding felt like an endless blur of regret and isolation. The weight of everything that had happened, the way my mother had publicly humiliated me, the look of betrayal in James's eyes, and the shame I carried, sat heavily on my chest. I didn't know what to do, or where to go from here. James and I hadn't spoken much since that night in the garden. He had said he needed time, and I respected that. But the silence between us was eating me alive. I spent the next week replaying everything in my mind, wondering what could have been different. I knew I had made mistakes, but I also knew I had been trying to protect what I had with James. What hurt the most was that my mom, the one person I had hoped would support me, had been the one to tear it all down. It was after a particularly sleepless night, lying awake in my apartment and staring at the ceiling, that I had an epiphany. I couldn't let my mother's manipulation destroy my life. I had allowed her to control me for far too long, to overshadow my decisions and make me feel unworthy of happiness. She had orchestrated the destruction of my wedding, knowing that it would drive a wedge between James and me. But I wasn't going to let her win. I knew I needed to take action, not just for myself, but for James too. He deserved the truth, my truth, without the weight of my mother's interference. And so, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight James for forgiveness anymore. I wasn't going to beg him to stay with me out of guilt or shame. If he couldn't accept me for who I was, then I would have to let him go. But I would do it on my terms, not on my mother's. The first thing I did was confront my mother. I hadn't spoken to her much after the wedding, and when I did, it was brief and strained. But I knew that if I was ever going to move on, I had to stand up to her. I couldn't let her control me any longer. It was a Saturday afternoon when I walked into my mother's house, the one I had grown up in, the place that always felt like a trap. She was sitting in the living room, reading a book, as if nothing had happened. The calmness of the scene made my stomach churn. I knew what I had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. "Mom," I said, my voice firm as I stepped into the room. She looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly as she saw me. "Olivia," she greeted me coldly, as if we were two strangers meeting on neutral ground. "What is it?" "I need to talk to you," I said, my heart pounding. "What you did at my wedding was unforgivable. You humiliated me in front of everyone, and you destroyed any chance I had of making things right with James." She didn't say anything at first. Instead, she set the book down and gave me a long, calculating look. "I did what I had to do," she said, her voice as sharp as ever. "You were hiding things from him. You needed to face the truth, Olivia." I could feel the anger rising in me. "You don't get to decide when I face the truth. That's my decision. And you certainly don't get to destroy my life in the process." She looked at me, unflinching, but I could see the tiniest flicker of something behind her eyes, something close to regret, though she would never admit it. "You're too sensitive," she said, her tone dismissive. "You're overreacting." "No, I'm not," I shot back, my voice rising. "I've spent my entire life trying to gain your approval, and every time I think I'm close, you push me further away. You've never once been happy for me. Not for real. You've always been more interested in controlling me than in supporting me." I could see her face harden at my words, but I didn't care. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me, about taking back my life. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I asked. "You destroyed my wedding, and now you've destroyed my relationship with James. I've spent years building something good, and you tore it apart in a single sentence. You never once considered how that would affect me, or him." My mother opened her mouth as if to argue, but I cut her off. "I'm done, Mom. I'm done letting you control me. I'm done seeking your approval. I'm done being your pawn. You've always tried to make me feel small, to make me believe that I'm not good enough. Well, I'm done believing that." For a long moment, there was silence between us. I wasn't sure if she was trying to comprehend what I had said, or if she was simply too prideful to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, she had gone too far. But I wasn't waiting for her to apologize. I had done enough waiting. "I'm not going to ask for your forgiveness," I said, my voice steady. "But I won't let you do this to me anymore. I won't let you control my happiness. I'm moving on, and I won't let you stand in my way." I turned to leave, my heart pounding, but I stopped at the door. "I don't need you in my life if this is how you're going to treat me. I'm not your little girl anymore. And I'm not going to let you tear me down just because you don't know how to build me up." I left before she could say another word. I didn't need her approval, and I didn't need to explain myself any further. I was finally taking control of my life. The next few weeks were the hardest I'd ever faced. James still hadn't spoken to me much, and I knew he was still processing everything. But I had decided that I wasn't going to chase after him. I had already made my peace with the fact that he might never forgive me. But I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't let my mother's poison seep into my future any longer. I spent time reflecting on myself, on my own growth. I spent time with my friends, people who truly cared about me, and I began to rediscover the parts of me that had been buried for so long. I started therapy to work through the guilt and shame I had been carrying. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was healing. A month later, I received a call from James. It was the first time we had really talked since the wedding. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name on my phone. "Liv," he said, his voice cautious but sincere. "I've been thinking about everything. About what happened, about the things I said. And I'm not going to lie, it's been hard. But I want you to know that I've been processing it. And I want to try again. I want to rebuild what we had. But I need to know that you're really committed to being honest with me, no matter what." I felt the tears well up in my eyes as I listened to him. "I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I'll be completely honest with you, James. I'm not perfect, but I'm ready to fight for us. We agreed to meet the following weekend, and when I saw him again, I could see that the spark was still there. There was work to be done, but for the first time since the wedding, I felt hopeful. Months passed, and while things between James and me were far from perfect, we were slowly rebuilding. The road to recovery was not easy, but it was worth it. And as for my mother? She tried to reach out a few times, but I kept my distance. I wasn't going to let her back into my life until she could respect my boundaries. In the end, I realized that I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had everything I needed within myself. And the revenge I got wasn't in some grand, dramatic gesture, it was in the simple act of taking control of my own life, of refusing to let anyone, especially my mother, dictate my happiness anymore. The best revenge? Living a life where I was no longer her pawn.